Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, June 12th, 2025. Sir Isaac Newton once wrote, "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself, I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." Sir Isaac Newton. So, would Moshe have said the same thing about himself? In this week's Torah portion, God tells us, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od." Moshe was exceedingly humble. Mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. He was the most humble person of any human being on earth. Does that mean that Moshe saw himself? Moshe, who received the Torah from God, who taught the Torah to the Jewish people, did Moshe consider himself to be like a boy playing by the seashore, the most humble of men? So I want to share with you an approach that I think is very, very important. I had the privilege in 1990, goes back, to attend the annual convention of the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America. And one of the highlights of that year's convention was a lecture delivered by Rabbi Norman Lamm of blessed memory. At that time, he was the president of Yeshiva University, and he delivered a lecture on the subject of anava, humility, being humble. And he began his lecture by saying that someone from his shul, from his synagogue, asked him, "I understand you're going to speak next week at the RCA. What is your topic?" And Rabbi Lamm said, "My topic is anava, humility." And this man said, "Great, that is just what rabbis need to hear." And it's true. So anava, modesty, self-effacement, not to think highly of oneself. And this is a supreme value throughout our tradition. To being an anav is a very high value. And Moshe, of course, was the greatest at this. So let's start with 4 questions. Number 1, is it true? Moshe was the greatest anav. I quoted to you. V'yish Moshe ana ma'od mikol ha'adam. He was the most humble person in the entire world. Did Moshe think that he was an am haaretz, like an ignorant person? Did he see himself as just like a regular Jew, nothing special? And if that's what humility means, that he didn't see himself as anything special, isn't that trait in conflict with emes, with truth? Because the truth is, Moshe was our greatest. That's number 1. Number 2, this trait of anava, of humility, is it psychologically healthy? Do we want a person who has certain clear abilities in whatever area it is to see themselves as ordinary? I'm nothing special. I'm an anav. I'm humble. Nothing special. Is that really healthy for a person to look at themselves as ordinary when it is clear that, at least in a certain area, they are extraordinary? Number 2. Number 3, there's an incredible passage in the Talmud. It's in Masechta Sota, and the Talmud says as follows: Mishemes Rebbe Batal Anava. Rebbe refers to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He is the one who edited the Mishnah into its final form. He lived in the 2nd century of the Common Era in the northern part of Israel. One of the greatest scholars that there has ever been in Jewish learning. And the Talmud says when he died, there was no more humility in the world because he was so great, but he was so humble. He had such humility. When he died, no one else came close to him in humility. Amalei Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef said, Lo teitznei anava. Don't say that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died, there was no more humility in the world. Di'ikana. What about me? I'm just as great an anav as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was. So, isn't bragging about being humble the opposite of being humble? How can you brag that you have humility? How can you be humble? Question number 4. There is a passage in the Talmud, another passage in the Talmud. We actually include this in our prayers on Saturday night. The Talmud says, I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, wherever you find an instance in the Torah that is an instance of God's greatness, sham atamotza anversanusu. There you will also, beside it, you will also find an example of God's humility. And it quotes verses from various places that God's greatness and God's humility. How can greatness and humility coexist? And how is it even possible to talk about humility in connection with God? I mean, it doesn't seem to even apply. Those are the 4 questions. Says Rabbi Norman Lamm, we are misunderstanding the terms. To have a low self-image, to think of oneself as ordinary, that's a different word. In rabbinic terminology, that's called shiflus, shiflut. A person thinks of themselves, I'm ordinary, I'm nothing special. That is not a valued quality. Anava would be better translated as meekness, to be meek. In other words, the ability to hear criticism and not respond. Anava requires a strong, realistic self-image in order not to react in anger. If someone criticizes me, I don't react. I don't respond. That's anava. And that requires me to feel I'm not going to respond because it's not true. I know what I am, and I'm just not going to pay attention to someone who's saying something that is obviously not true. That's anava. But it requires a strong self-image to do that. And that's what the Talmud means. Rabbi Yosef recognized within himself that he had this quality, dikana. I have this ability, that I have a strong self-image, I know myself, and if someone criticizes me, I don't have to respond. The difference between shiflus, a low self-image, and anava, what it means to be meek. Shiflus is bein adam la'atzmo. It is between a person and themselves. It is how a person thinks about themselves. I see myself as a normal, regular person, nothing special. That is not a quality to be desired. Meekness has nothing to do with self-image. It's bein adam l'chavero. It's the way that I act towards others. Of course, Moshe realized his singular greatness. But he was also the greatest anav in that he didn't think it made him any better than anyone else, and he didn't look down on anybody else. And he didn't answer when he was criticized. In fact, this verse that I've been quoting comes within the narrative at the end of this week's Torah portion, where Miriam and Aharon are talking about Moshe, their brother. They're all siblings. And Miriam says something negative about Moshe. And Moshe doesn't respond. Moshe doesn't say anything. God responds. God responds and says, how could you talk like that about Moshe? Moshe is the greatest prophet, and he's also the most humble of all men. How could you talk? But Moshe didn't say a word. And in order for Moshe to do that, he had to have a positive self-image. He had to recognize, I don't need to respond to Miriam because I know what I am and I know who I am. There's no need for me to respond. And that's what we want to value. That's what we want our children to have. In fact, there's a line in Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Meir used to say, Havi shafel ruach bifnei kol adam. Be exceedingly humble in the face of others. Now, he uses the words shafel ruach. It sounds like he's talking about shiflus, but that's not what he's talking about, because he says specifically bifnei kol adam, in the way that you relate to other people. That's not shiflus, that's anava. Don't consider yourself, don't look down on others because you're smarter than them. Don't look down on others because you have more than them. And that's how Moshe acts. That's the definition of anava. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks phrases it as follows. Many people think that the meaning of humility is low self-esteem. That's not true. To be an anav, humility means not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Don't spend so much time thinking about how great you are. Spend more time thinking about helping other people. True anava does not need recognition. An anav is a person who does not think about themselves simply because they have more important things to think about. According to Rabbi Lamm, the proper understanding of anava is the proper understanding to need to develop high self-image. And because of that, a person is not driven to arrogance or to look down on any other person. Some time ago, I shared with some of you part of a lecture, a famous lecture, that was given years ago by the Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik. This part of it I did not share with you, so I'm sharing it tonight. The Rav asked this question about Miriam speaking negatively about her younger brother Moshe. How could she do such a thing? Miriam is the one who saved Moshe's life when he was a baby. She helped to raise him. Throughout the entire 40 years in the desert, she is by his side, advising him, helping him, supporting him. I've spoken a number of times about the various lessons that Moshe learned from Miriam. How is it possible that after all this happens, she turns into a prosecuting attorney and she's criticizing him? And equally hard to understand, and let me just Hear the psukim. Vatadaber Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe. Miriam and Aaron started to talk about Moshe, negatively about Moshe. Miriam was speaking, Aaron was listening. And then the Torah says, I told you before, Moshe doesn't answer, doesn't respond. Then the Torah says, Vayered Hashem ba'amud anan. God descended in a cloud of glory. Vayikra Aaron and Miriam vayotzu shneim. And God said, Aaron and Miriam, come here, I want to talk to you. Vayomer shimu na dvarai. He said to Aaron and Miriam, listen to me carefully. You think that your prophet's the same as Moshe? No, you're nothing like Moshe. Lo kain avdi Moshe. Moshe is on a completely different level than you are. B'chol beisi ne'emanu, peh el peh adaber bo. I speak to Moshe face to face, unlike any other prophet. Why aren't you afraid to talk about Moshe in these terms? How dare you use negative terms to talk about Moshe? So number one, how could Miriam say such a thing? And number two, it's surprising how quickly and how forcefully God responds. So the Rav explained that the theme of this narrative concerns the proper understanding of Torah leadership. Let me explain. In our Torah portion, Baloscha, Moshe realizes something that he never appreciated before. From the first time that God spoke to Moshe, Moshe understood that he was being chosen as the teacher of the Jewish people. Moshe was not chosen because he was the best negotiator. He did negotiate with Paro for a long time, not very successfully. There were other people who probably could have been a better negotiator. That's not what God was looking for at the burning bush. God was looking for a teacher. God was looking for someone who could transmit the Torah, who could transmit the importance of holiness to the Jewish people. And for that, Moshe was unparalleled. And Moshe understood that his role was to be the teacher. We refer to him as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. That was his principal role. In this week's Torah portion, something happens. Just before the narrative with Miriam. Vayihi ha'am k'mizonanin, and the people started to complain. Vayihi ha'am k'mizonanin, rabbaznei Hashem, and the people complaining was evil to God. And they were complaining about everything. They were complaining about how long the journey was. They're complaining about the food. They're complaining they wanted to go back to Egypt. Zacharnu Asadaga, we remember how great it was in Egypt. You know, the height of revisionist history. They're complaining. And listen to how Moshe responds. Vayishma Moshe es ha'am. Moshe heard their complaining. Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, lama hareosa lavdecha. Why have you done such harm to me, your servant? Why have I not found favor in your eyes that you put this burden on me? This is the first time in the entire Torah that Moshe does not come to the defense of the Jewish people, but he now claims to God, why did you give me this burden? Why have you made my life so difficult that I have to lead these people? Listen to his words. Hanochi horisi es kol ha'amazeh? Did I give birth to these people, that they're my babies, that they're my children? Imanochi eladetiu? Did I give birth to them? Ki somer alai, that you should say to me, God, sa'eu b'chaikecha. You were required, Moshe, to carry them in your arm like a nursing mother carries her baby in her arm? That's what I'm supposed to do? Moshe, and again, this is the first time that Moshe responds to anything like this. And what Moshe is saying is, I understood that you selected me as a teacher, and I have done that. But now I'm a nursing mother. I'm carrying around babies. Listen to what the Rav says. What does it mean when Moshe says that he's like a mother carrying around her baby who's nursing from her? Father teaches the child, mother teaches the child. They're both teachers. But a mother who has given birth to a child does something else. A teacher teaches students, children, but the student doesn't become a part of the teacher. After the class, the teacher goes home and the students go home. When a woman gives birth to a baby, the mother has only one purpose in life: to protect her child. As long as the baby is helpless, a mother, she doesn't belong to herself, because she is constantly needed by her baby. Now, yes, of course, mothers can have someone else to help with that. Yes. And that's fine. But when a mother is caring for a newborn baby, that mother has no life of her own until the baby is able to do certain things. And hopefully until the father starts to help out a little bit more. That's what Moshe is saying. Moshe discovered that to be the teacher of the Jewish people is not enough. Because a teacher, no matter how dedicated, still has a life of his or her own. Moshe understood at this moment that his role is not just as a teacher, but as a nursing mother. He is expected to have no personal life. It's as if he is caring for these babies 24/7. That's what he means. He became the nurse, the mother nurse of the Jewish people. And that's what Miriam, his sister, resented. Miriam resented, what do you mean? You can't have a life? You can't have a family? You can't have relations like every other person? We're prophets. Aaron and I, Miriam says, we're also prophets. God speaks to us, and we have families. We have a life. How is it that you now realize that you've got this role, that you have no personal life? And that's why God intervenes. And God says, Lo kain avdi Moshe avdi. Moshe, my servant, is not like you. You're a prophet. Fantastic, amazing, incredible. But you have a life. But what the task that I've given Moshe, it's completely different than yours. Moshe's role is to not only teach, but to care for, like a mother is caring for her nursing baby. That means 24/7, 365. Near the end of the Torah, in the book of Devarim, near the end of Moshe's life, God says, "V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael kamoshe." There will never arise a prophet again like Moshe. In other words, God will never again ask of a person what God demanded of Moshe. Because it's too much. God expected it from Moshe. And at this point, Moshe reaches a breaking point. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But God says that's it. It's not going to work for anybody else. Lo kam navi od b'Yisrael kamoshe. I will never again ask that of a person. I just want to point out to you that even still, for us, on our level, low down from Moshe, nowhere near. But there's an equally valid lesson for every single one of us. And that is as follows. We have teachers. We have Torah teachers. Baruch Hashem, thank God. We have many wonderful Torah teachers. And they can explain, and they can communicate, and they can answer, and that is so important. We cannot live as Jews without great Torah teachers who we can relate to, who we can learn from, who we can appreciate, who we can look at as role models. But for a teacher to be a Torah leader, he or she must also be, to a certain extent, not as much as Moshe, but to a certain extent, like a nursing mother, in the sense that to be a leader, a person must not only teach, but they must also care for their students, care for their followers. To a certain extent, to be concerned with their welfare, to anticipate their needs, to share and ease their pain. And it requires a certain amount of self-sacrifice, not as much as Moshe, on a completely different level. But on our level, the role of a Torah leader is to a certain extent 24/7, 365. To be a Torah leader requires an involvement with the people you're leading beyond just the subject that you're teaching. And this is what it takes to grow from a Torah teacher to a Torah leader. So I want to come back to this point that this is Moshe's lowest moment in the entire Torah. The moment when he is overwhelmed by the petty complaining of the Jewish people. You don't like the food. You don't like walking so much. I want to focus on how God responds to that. What did God do to help Moshe through this crisis? But before we see that, let's just focus for a moment on a statement that Moshe makes. I didn't read it yet. A shattering statement that Moshe makes in his despair, in the midst of his despair. And what I'm going to say now is a slightly different approach than what I just said before. There are multiple approaches. I quoted to you, Vayomer Moshe Hashem. Moshe said to God, Lama hariosa lavdecha. Why are you giving me this burden? Why are you making it so difficult for me that I've got to be able to be a nursing mother to the entire Jewish people? I've got to listen to these petty complaints. Lo uchal anochi levadi lo seises kol ha'amazeh. I can't do it anymore. I'm not able to carry the burden of this people anymore. Ki kaved mi many. It's too much for me. It's too heavy. V'im kacha at oseli. And if this is what you expect of me, Moshe says to God, Hargeni naharog, take my life. I can't live like this. It's not worth living if this is what you expect of me. I can't do it. Moshe reaches a breaking point. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out something very interesting. Moshe says to God, you expect me to be like a nursing mother to these people, like I gave birth to them? Rabbi Sachs points out, God never said that to Moshe. God never said to Moshe, I want you to be a nurse mother to the Jewish people. I want you to be 24/7 and never have a personal life. God never said that. God asked Moshe to lead. He didn't tell Moshe how to lead. He told Moshe what to do, but he didn't discuss Moshe's leadership style. Rabbi Sachs says the Torah may be hinting here that the way Moshe conceived of his role was part of the problem. So Rabbi Sachs discusses two different models of leadership. And this comes from the work of Gustav Le Bon. It was later used by Sigmund Freud. So there is a great man theory of leadership. Before we go any further, I just want to say, I'm not referring to any current politics or politicians. You can make your own judgments. I'm talking Torah. I'm sharing with you what Rabbi Sachs says. If you want to apply it to somebody, I'm not getting involved with that. There's a great man theory of leadership. And that theory goes like this. A leader is someone who is highly charismatic. He promises solutions to all of the problems of the people. He or she is strong, persuasive, clear, offers a simple analysis of why the people are suffering. He identifies enemies, and he says, leave it to me. All you have to do is follow and obey what I say, and everything's going to be great. That is what is called the great man theory of leadership. And it appears that Moshe has intuited that that's his style of leadership. He is expressing here that he seems to have felt that he must do it all. He's got to be their teacher, their father, their mother, their nursemaid. He's got to do it all. The problem with this model of leadership is that if the leader can be compared to a parent, then the followers will remain children. They don't develop skills on their own. They're completely dependent on him or her. They don't acquire a sense of responsibility or the self-confidence that comes from that. So when there's a moment that Moshe is not there, remember the golden calf, the people panic because without the great leader, without the great man leader, we're nothing. We have no ability. If he's away and we don't know where he is, even for a few hours, we start to panic. There's hysteria. And when Moshe feels that he reaches a point in our Torah portion where he cannot be that great leader, then he collapses. And the truth is, every leader, every person at some point feels like collapsing. No exceptions. But what is absolutely fascinating is God's response. Now listen to this carefully. It's amazing what Rabbi Sachs explains. So what could God have said to Moshe? Well, he could say to Moshe, come on, cheer up, pull yourself together. You're bigger than this. You can get over this. Instead, God says something to Moshe that is very, very practical, something that is a tremendous lesson for us as well. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God says to Moshe, after Moshe says, I can't take it anymore. If this is what you want from me, take my life. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem responds and says, Esfoli shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Gather together 70 elders that you know that they are qualified people. And take them with you to the Ohel Moed, to the Mishkan, to the sanctuary, and they will be with you there. I will descend, God says, and I will speak to you there. And I will take some of the burden that is on you and I will share it with them. So that you don't have to do it by yourself. This is very similar to what we saw much earlier in the Torah. In the Parsha of Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, comes to visit. And Moshe, that's talking about judging. Yisro sees that his son-in-law Moshe is judging the people from day till night. And he says, Moshe, that's not the way to do it. You can't do it by yourself. You're going to get burned out. You're going to collapse. Select people who will be qualified judges, and you'll share the burden with the different judges, many, many judges. You'll share the burden. And that's what God is saying. It's as if God is saying to Moshe, don't try to do it alone. Even you, the greatest of prophets, you're still a human being. So gather together some people to help you. Have friends. And here's what's interesting. We have no idea what these 70 elders actually did. The Torah doesn't record anything that they actually did, but simply being with Moshe was part of the cure. And what is amazing about God's response is that at this moment of Moshe's collapse, his darkest moment, God speaks to Moshe as a friend. And this is fundamental to our understanding of God, because God is not only the creator of the universe, the Lord of history, the lawgiver, the redeemer. God is also close and tender and loving. In Tehillim, Psalms, God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. The Navi Yeshayahu, Isaiah, as a mother comforts her child, so I, God, will comfort you. Again in Tehillim, God is like a shepherd. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. Hashem roi lo yachzor, God is my shepherd. I'm not going to fear anything. Again in Tehillim, Karov Hashem l'chol karov, God is close to all who call to him. And this response of God helps. Moshe is comforted. He gathers together these 70. God tells him not to worry about the complaining. He'll take care of the food. He'll take care of the other stuff. But what is amazing is right after this, Moshe appears to be a changed person. Yehoshua, who is going to be his successor, tells him, oh, there are other people that are prophesying. It seems to be a challenge to your leadership. Moshe says, let other people prophesy. I don't have to be the only one. We never heard such an idea from Moshe before. In the narrative that we were studying before, when Miriam is speaking negatively about him, he doesn't respond. He doesn't have to say anything. Rabbi Sachs says that the Torah is giving us a remarkable account of the psychodynamics of emotional crisis. And the first thing that the Torah is telling us is in the midst of despair, don't be alone. In this case, God performs the role of comforter. God tells Moshe, you won't have to do it alone. There'll be other people to help you. Our sages say, a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. It needs somebody else to lift you out of despair. And somebody else can lift you out of despair because maybe through the fact that they're giving good advice to you, or maybe simply the fact that they're there, which is more often the case. And that's why Jewish values call for never leaving a person alone at a time of maximum vulnerability. We have the principle, the mitzvah, Bikur Cholim, to visit someone who's sick. What do you do when you visit? It doesn't matter what you do. You be there. Person is vulnerable. They're upset. They're not feeling good. God forbid a person suffers a loss. We go to visit them, to visit the Shiva, Nichum Avelim, to comfort the mourners. We are required, and all of our celebrations, to include those who are alone, to invite to our table anyone who's alone, to offer hospitality. The famous lesson that we learned from Avram, that showing hospitality is greater than greeting the Shekhinah, God's presence. God was Moshe's friend. And in Moshe's darkest hour, God gives Moshe comfort through that friendship. And that is a model for us to help ourselves when we need it, to help those we love in our darkest moment, in their darkest moment. I must share something personal. I want to share something personal. Baruch Hashem, thank God. It is one of the greatest aspects of my life that I am surrounded by people who care for me. It is such a blessing. People who look out for me, people who stand with me when I need it the most. Baruch Hashem, I'm so blessed to have family, I have friends, I have congregants, I have colleagues, I have students, I have teachers. And that includes many of you. Baruch Hashem, it's a blessing. I can't imagine what life would be like without that. Rabbi Sachs concludes and he writes, people become what their leader gives them the space to become. When that space is large, they grow into greatness. And to do that, leaders need friends to help them. My friends, I wish you a great evening and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.